Susie, quick double check. Can you hear me okay?
Sounds good, Phil.
Perfect, thanks.
All right, good morning, everyone. It is 10:45 here on Thursday morning. Welcome to this edition of our lead meeting. We appreciate those that are joining us live here, and then also those that are viewing our recordings, again, trying to give you the best information that assists you in doing your job. We have officially wrapped up our fall tournaments, finally got football done and completed here in December for the first time. This is just a great reminder of how essential you are in that tournament process, whether you worked a tournament or actually held a quarterfinal performance or sections. Again, just thank you for all the work that you do that go into our tournaments. For those that participated, congratulations, and congratulations to our champions. Well, this is also our last meeting here before we come back to you in January. Hopefully you take time away with your families and friends and enjoy that holiday season. We also have the largest contingent of ADs traveling to Nashville here later this week or this weekend. Travel safe and enjoy your professional development time. We hope to see you there as well. Our agenda this week really consists of, again, topics we discuss with our liaisons. They continue to guide us and give us great information and feedback, some of which is also a result of our board meeting from last week. And again, we'll want to cover a number of different topics today that you can see here on the agenda. You'll hear from myself, Eric, Charlie, Lisa, and Phil in today's meeting. Let's move forward and talk a little bit about our board meeting from last Thursday. Eric, I'll turn it over to you at this time.
Thanks, Bob, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for tuning in here in December as we, as Bob said, wrapped up our fall. Our board met last Thursday, just before the Prep Bowl on Friday and Saturday, and the action item that was listed in the agenda was around the Adoption of Activities Task Force. Again, a little bit of history there. The board called for a task force back in June of 22 to really clearly establish a pathway for adoption of interscholastic programs. And within that, they also indicated an interest in considering our presenting partner status in certain tournaments and also moving forward, as well as considerations for sunsetting programs when or if that becomes appropriate. Our Adoption of Programs Task Force did a great job in the work that they've done so far. They brought forward a recommendation to the board of directors around establishing an emerging status for activities that are choosing to be or asking to be brought into the Minnesota State High School League in full interscholastic status, which means that the league would take over the governance of the regular season as well as state tournament, as well as creating and or adopting rules and being in charge of those as well. And so these are very specific to those activities that want to become fully a part of the Minnesota State High School League. This does not take away the rep assembly process. The emerging status is part of the rep assembly process. It is a step along the way, and it has clearly defined metrics and benchmarks that must be met. And again, remember that proposals to rep assembly come from our member schools by and large. And so it takes our schools to ask for and request the adoption of a new program through that emerging status. Ultimately, in discussion, our board was very appreciative of the work of the task force and did approve the emerging status. That work is now in final revision so that it can be posted. A lot of folks have questions about what exactly is included in that. But ultimately, it will provide an opportunity for a more gradual adoption of activities. Following that decision, and as we move to the next slide, the board also took on two other action items. And one of those was to consider boys volleyball relative to the newly adopted emerging status. They considered where volleyball was for this year, and that those schools that are offering boys volleyball already have registered with the Minnesota Boys Volleyball Association, have their plans in place and are moving forward for a spring season. So there was no action relative to this school year. This school year will continue as is. The board did approve boys volleyball to move into emerging status next year. And so some of those things that come with this is that teams will register with the Minnesota State High School League if that is their choosing. That will provide them the opportunity to participate in the season as well as the postseason. Know that eligibility rules would apply. Certified head coaches would be required for schools that offer boys volleyball through this. and as well as co-op rules and other bylaws, those are all going to be in place. The high school league would not take care of the postseason. That would be under the current governing board through the Minnesota Boys Volleyball Association, and therefore the season would not change. We aren't changing that while things are in emerging status. We're moving alongside the Volleyball Association in that to be able to offer that. The board then also took action relative to the current proposal that has been brought forward by many schools around boys volleyball and advanced that directly to the rep assembly with a determined implementation date of 2024-25. Question about what season would boys volleyball ultimately be placed in will be answered by the Minnesota State High School League, as we always do, using input from our member schools, a variety of sources, from officials to coaches to administrators, to determine where boys volleyball would fit best, should the representative assembly approve that on May 9th. Bob, anything there that you think needs review and or additions to?
Yeah, Eric, thanks for all your work on this, and thank you to our board. Here's what I would pay attention to most if I'm an activities director. Number one, a new term, emerging status. Boys volleyball will be an example of an emerging status opportunity. And then that interscholastic, right? The earliest opportunity that boys volleyball will have to become a sanctioned interscholastic sport will be 2024, 2025. For schools that are participating or have those teams, you have some time to plan, and I like the gradual process that's in place. Eric, let's talk a little bit more about what took place, and also looks like we have our advisory proposals to discuss too coming out of the board meeting as well. Eric?
Thanks, Bob. And yes, fall activity advisory proposals have been presented to the board. These again come through our advisory committees, and we ask that they gain as much information as they can from their constituency, and also abide by completing the new form that has been adopted for activity advisory proposals. You can see a few things here, and we'll take them kind of in order of when their tournaments take place. Tennis is requesting that Class A be seeded by teams similar to what Class AA has been for quite some time. Class A initially had not asked for that and had been randomly selected for the pairings in the state tournament. They are now requesting that Class A be seeded there for girls tennis. There also is a proposal from tennis to move from 2 classes to 3 classes in both boys tennis and girls tennis. And that is also has very specific information relative to the breakdown of what classes should look like. And so would encourage everyone to take a look at that. Again, remember that all of these changes or proposed changes can be found on our website under proposed rule changes. So you can see the full request that's part of each one of these. In soccer, the advisory committee came forward and asked for consideration to remove regular season overtime. We have allowed ties in the regular season. And as many of you know, there is a 5-minute, 2 5-minute overtime periods currently within soccer. In removing that, or the request to remove that, just an indication to indicate that oftentimes those regular season overtimes do not result in a change in score. It makes for 10 more minutes of playing time without much change. And so they're requesting that that be removed for a variety of reasons. Again, always request that you do some reading on that. But also they brought forward a proposal to implement a mercy rule, which would create a running clock in the second half when the gap is 5 goals or more between 2 teams. Again, should there be significant injury timeout, that would stop the clock, but otherwise it would be running continuously through the second half. Volleyball Activity Advisory brought forward a request to increase the roster size from 15 to 18 for players. And that goes along with the limits that exist for managers and coaches. But that is what that request is, rather straightforward. And then football brought forward a proposal to have the state tournament qualifiers going into the quarterfinal round, to have those teams that qualify seeded 1 through 8 for all classes from 9-player football to 5A. As you know, 6A has its own predetermined bracket that schools drop into based on their seed from their section. But with these are the other 6 classes that are requesting that state tournament teams, after they would qualify, would be seeded 1 through 8 and then matched up for quarterfinals. And so again, taking some time to become familiar with that. The process is that our board has now discussed these in a workshop as well as in the board meeting. We'll have another workshop here in January, and ultimately decisions would be made in February. Your involvement could be getting involved with your region committees, providing your feedback directly to your representatives or the region committee. And then the board would make a vote in February, and those that would be approved would go into place for next year's fall season. So Bob, that is the update from the board.
Very good. A number of proposals here from our fall sports, and I think we'll continue to see that there's a pattern here for many of our sports. So thank you for that, Eric. Let's move into the competitive section placement. Tis that season, and when we come back in January, that pace will pick up even more so. Be aware where this timeline is found. Encourage you to tab that, use that, take a look at that almost weekly when we get back here in January. Laura shows nicely where it's found here on the left-hand side. Please note December 16th is a time for our non-public schools to go ahead and fill out that form if they would like their free and reduced numbers taken into account for their MSHSL enrollment. If you are a school that's considering a co-op, that should be completed before January 27th. If that will be considered for either an appeal and or opt-up, we need to know what those co-ops are, work with Amanda from our office to make sure that's completed. Again, tab this timeline, keep this in front of you because it does cover both competitive section placement and district football. Speaking of district football, if you look at the next slide here, you received an email that went out to every school, and we need every team that competes in football to complete that school information form. Even if you're 100% satisfied with your district football placement at this time, we need to hear that back from you and why you like your placement or why the district football committee should consider other placement options. Again, you will hear more about this timeline and more about the steps along the way. We appreciate all of the questions. We've also asked our liaisons to become experts in this area to assist you in your part of the state. We can move from there at this time onto our next slide, please. And we are going to go to Charlie at this time to talk about our statewide contest management conversation.
Thanks, Bob. Good morning, everybody. On November 21st, we facilitated a lead network conversation for activities directors focused on event management, really centered on two areas. The first was respectful and sporting behavior, and the second was event safety and security. We did have more than 100 ADs participate in breakout room discussions led by several of our liaisons, and a special thank you to our liaisons and to all those who were able to participate with us and contribute to that conversation. We have synthesized the data from those conversations, and we've made it available for all ADs. And as the image on the slide shows you, you can access that in your education section behind the MSHSL Lead Hub button. Understand that the information and resources that have been made available to you are not meant to be requirements placed upon you or your school. Rather, they're to be used as resources for you as you work locally and in collaboration within your conferences and other regional schools to effectively manage your events. We did have follow-up conversations with our liaisons, and we learned a few things or heard a few things about that conversation or about those conversations on event management. One thing we heard was that common expectations between schools are not easy based on your unique school settings and the challenges that you're facing locally. We heard ADs say that they want shared expectations, and that they are challenging based on those pressing issues that you may be faced in your school. Perhaps most encouraging is we heard that ADs continued this conversation in conferences and regional settings and continued to identify what common expectations and common language could be used. And we just want to make sure that you hear us say that these conversations are important, and we encourage you to continue to have those conversations, create and communicate those where and when you can. We also heard that this was a good format for connecting ADs from all over the state. And so we look forward to exploring additional content areas and opportunities to do this in the future. And Bob, I'll turn it back to you.
Good, thank you, Charlie, and thanks for your work on facilitating this conversation. We're all looking for expectations and what that should be in contests, and I think that flows nicely into together we make a difference as we're seeking that student impact as well in this conversation. If we could, at this time, let's go to that next slide, and Lisa, talk about more about the next opportunity with Together We Make a Difference.
Thanks, Bob, and great input, Charlie. And I think that leads nicely to this information that we're going to share about Together We Make a Difference. First and foremost, thank you to those schools who hosted those statewide regional conferences. We got great information, and the synthesization workshop was a very productive day. With that, we are looking at January 13th, and a big thank you to Osseo area schools who is willing to host this event, and it will be at Park Center High School. Please look forward to updated information that will be being sent to you in the next day or two with registration information as well as other details. We are asking that you start to think about 10 students per school that would be able to attend this event with an adult leader. And really to continue that conversation and be intentional about the language that we're using around our events. And so that will be coming probably to you, as well as be prepared that your superintendents and principals will get communication from their state associations as well regarding this. So Bob, I will turn it back to you on that.
Great, thank you, Lisa. And that January 13th date will come very quick when we come back from that holiday break. What I've heard is 10 students per school. Start thinking about who those might be when registration opens. Let's make sure we have as many schools participating as possible. Charlie, let's talk about AD education and where we're currently at and what you see moving forward as well. Charlie?
Great. Just a reminder that we did have information that was first shared with you about this in last week's update. We have a board policy that requires ADs to complete a condensed version of the Minnesota head coach's course within their first 3 years in their role as an AD. Because this is a newer requirement, many veteran ADs will need to complete this by July 2023. And note that the purpose of this requirement is to create alignment and common language between ADs and their head coaches who have taken the Minnesota head coaches course in order to meet the Minnesota state statute requirements to be a varsity head coach in Minnesota. In your education area on your dashboard, behind the AD education button, you can check both your status, whether or not you've completed the requirement, and register for upcoming courses in order to meet that requirement. We are planning 3 opportunities this year for you to engage with that course. There will be 2 virtual options. Registrations are now open, one in January and one in April. There will also be an in-person opportunity at the MNI AAA conference towards the end of March. If you have any questions or need assistance, you can reach out to Amy Ince in our office, and certainly I'm available to help as well. Bob?
Very good. We're going to hear from Phil here in our next 3 slides covering state tournament dates and venues. Some of those have changed or have potential for change. Our quick takes, and then our checklist, and we'll come back to me at the end. Phil, lead us through these next 3 slides here.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Bob. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Good to see some faces on here. So state tournament dates and venues. We've got a couple adjustments for you. Alpine ski is spreading out a day. So we've got February 14, 15, and 16. And essentially, we're adding an additional day to create a better flow of the event, right? Better opportunities and better format for the racers, the families, spectators, when it comes down to parking, lodging, the whole 9. So we believe this will be an advantage and a benefit to the tournament and the experience overall. So those are the dates that you'll see there for Alpine Ski and the reason. On the speech aspect, so speech moved to April 28th and April 29th, and that is moving it off of a holiday that is the end of Ramadan called Eid al-Fitr, I believe is the proper pronunciation of it. So so that's moved off of that date, and it gives us the ability to have more kids there participating without any conflict. And then as we look at baseball, our last one here, it's not an actual date change, but it is a venue change. The venue change due to an extended home stay by the Minnesota Twins. Bob and Eric worked with the Twins to try and figure out a solution that involved us staying there at Target Field, but it couldn't work in a time frame that worked best for us. So that championship day will be at CHS Field on June 16th. So those are our 3 state tournament date or venue changes that we've got in front of you here today. Susie, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide for some quick takes. So, so if we look at our, just like we did, our statewide event conversation on event management, we'll have something similar coming down the pike here in January for an information session based on competitive section placement. So keep an eye out for that. We'd like to get as much participation as possible to help new ADs and some newer ADs get more information on all the ins and the outs of that. And you know, it's a big and cumbersome process, and there's a lot of little ins and outs to learn about it. And so facilitating some of that information with some feedback that we got from our lead liaisons and some other groups as well. And so look out for information on that and register for it when that becomes available. Charlie talked a little bit on the head coaching courses and the certification along with that. There is a date in January for that, and there'll be several in February as well that Charlie mentioned, the ability to take it at the spring conference that the MNI AAA will be putting on. So, and then another quick heads up here on recording of your participation numbers in your fall activities and sports, as those have all wrapped up. Right. These are going to be submitted or asked to be submitted to the MSHSL at the end of the school year. And these help for things like insurance and program planning for the league. And so we request those participation numbers for you. And everyone does it a little bit different, but I know for a fact that it makes it a little easier if you've tracked all your fall numbers at the end of the fall season, and then you've gotten into it at the winter season, and then in the spring it's just a little bit less cumbersome to work through when those numbers are required sometime in the May-June timeframe, somewhere along that. Let's go ahead on to our next slide. All right, and as we turn the corner here, I'll try and put everything in, you know, together with a nice bow on it here, but we've got a pretty cumbersome list here. So emergency action plan. I would just say, remember to work with your coaches, all of your coaches, and account for all of your venues. I think planning is the first step to successfully navigating any situations where an issue does arise. December 15th is our football information form for district football. Bob hit on that a little bit earlier in there and getting that in. That's located on your dashboard under the MSHSL resources on the right side in that column there, and there is a district football placement piece that you could click on. It's not an actual button, but it's listed there. December 16th is that non-public fall report form. Bob mentioned that earlier as well, and that takes into account the free and reduced lunch for your non-publics there. I would get that in and look into that form. That's also under that resources, that MSHSL resources column there, and it's under the classification and competitive section placement button that's there on the right side of the screen. So you can use that to find the proper form for that. Eric hit on some of our fall activity proposals that are coming through. Your regions have those, and you should be getting some information on that. If you have not, I would highly recommend reaching out to your region secretaries or having some conversation with ADs in your local network that you work on to get some information on that. We want you to be able to to get some information from your region secretaries, but then also provide some feedback to them so that it gets back to us in a way that we can do things that are in the best interest of our coaches, ADs, and programs. January 20th is the deadline, or the date that we're asking you to submit your your spring supply orders. So when I say supply orders, I mean your NFHS rule books, score books, different things along those lines, your resources for yourself, your office, and your coaches to work through. And that can be found on your dashboard under school admin resources, and then under that school admin resources, you'll see that there's an MSHSL online store button, and that's an actual button that's right in the middle of the page there. You can click on that, and that'll take you to the selection area where you can pick out what you need to properly set up your coaches for that spring season there. Moving in here to completion of the foundation applications for B1 and for B2. So the foundation set aside a certain amount of money to help with the transportation costs to any schools that took part in our World Cafes and the aspects of Together We Make a Difference that required some travel. And so there's a form in there that you can put together for reimbursement on any of those travel expenses that dealt with yourself or your kids moving to any of those World Cafes. The B2 form is just your traditional reimbursement form on transportation for section or different events that you could require that you would require transportation, and look for reimbursement from those. You can find those in the top of your screen on the website there under the About tab, and then you can click on Foundation, and that'll take you to the areas where you can look into the B1 and B2 forms. Now, B1 is due on January 20th and B2 is on February 15th. So just keep that in your mind on your calendar as far as timing. Charlie did a great job on talking about AD education and some aspects of that requirement that needs to be done within 3 years of starting your career as an athletic director. When you go to your AD resources and AD education on your dashboard, you should be able to see if you have completed that certification or not. If you have, for whatever reason, and that's not clicked, that check mark's not there in that box, please reach out to us, Laura McIntoon here in the office, and we can get down to the bottom of it. Those things are manually inputted from old system to new system, and so there's a potential that could be there. So if there's some confusion on that front, don't hesitate to reach out on there, but that is where you check to see if you've met that requirement. And then if you haven't, also take into account making a plan for knocking that out here in the next several opportunities that those are available through January, February, and that spring conference. All right. Last couple things here as we're turning the corner. Big deep breath here. Confirm that your coaches have met your education requirements. Going on that dashboard and working with your coaches now, early in this winter season, to make sure that when we get into tournament time, we're not scrambling. I can tell you firsthand, there were a handful of coaches that we had to work with coming mid to late season to get some of those things knocked out, because whether it was a coaching change or just a new person to your school and your programs, those certifications, those requirements need to be met for them to participate and coach at the state tournament, section of state tournament level. So make sure that all those things are taken care of now early in the season. It covers your bases on a ton of other things as well. So, and then lastly, I just want to throw a quick reminder out here. Lisa talked a little bit about Together We Make a Difference and some of the things that are going to be coming on here in January. The statewide conference, information on when that registration will become available will be out to you soon. But the statewide conference, is going to happen here in January. And I want you right now to start to put in your brain, registration's not open yet, but start to think about who those up to 10 individuals that you would like to bring to this conference. And then when that registration becomes available, go ahead and get ready to do that relatively quick, because I believe the limitation is at 1,500. Lisa, does that sound right? Give me a quick nod. Yep. So that limitation is at 1,500, and that will fill up quick. So I just want to challenge you all right now to go ahead and start thinking about what students you'd like to bring, who do you like to come to that, and then when that notification gets out on the registration being available, go ahead and jump on that quick so that you can get your kids there and be a part of that experience and the conversation that's going to impact what happens in our member schools. So I know that was a ton of information in a relatively short period of time, but this is being recorded. If you got to go back through it, please feel free to do so. But with that, Bob, I'll turn it over to you and we can kind of put a bow on this thing.
Very good. Thank you, Phil. And our checklist might feel like a 3-credit college class right now, but we'll continue to work with you and make sure that you're aware of what you need and when. Again, thank you for all of your work. Enjoy this month of December. We'll come back in January and see you again. Enjoy this time with family and friends. And for those of you that are heading to Nashville, we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.